No, I wasn't. Sorry, Billy.
Get me here right. Kia ora everybody, it's great to be here on the rainy West Coast to do a number of visits with my good friend Damien O'Connor, where we've been visiting projects that have been supported by the government. The first visit was to Food Rescue, a program supported through MSD to reduce food waste and support communities by making sure that that food is instead being directed into people's tummies, which is something that I think the government certainly wants to continue to support. Here in Greymouth, we're visiting one of many investments that we're making right the way across regional New Zealand to support local economies. This is about creating local jobs, both in the short term in terms of the building and construction sector, but also in the long term in terms of investment in tourism, investment in creating local jobs and local economic opportunities. And this is a really good example here of the sort of projects that we're seeing funded around the country and that are actually coming to fruition and helping to generate good local jobs that keep people in work. It's one of the reasons why I'm really proud of the work that we have done as a government through the Provincial Growth Fund, through the Strategic Investment Fund and other initiatives that we've had in place, which are about making sure that we're creating economic opportunity so that those Kiwis who are keen to get out there and work hard and get ahead have the opportunity to do that. I think the choice that New Zealanders have in this election becomes more and more clear by the day. A government that wants to back Kiwis to stay and work, that wants to grow our local and regional economies through targeted investments like the one that we're in today, or a government, a national government, that wants to cut everything. The National Party's tax plan simply doesn't add up. It's going to result in massive cuts to New Zealand's public services. They've already been upfront about the fact that they're proposing to cut, I think, about $6 billion out of our public services. And in fact, Nicola Willis yesterday was boasting about the fact that she is going to make a lot of those cuts before Christmas. Let's be clear what that means. That means thousands of Kiwis losing their job right before Christmas if National gets elected at this election. Nicola Willis was boasting yesterday about the fact that those cuts are going to come in straight away. That means thousands of people finding themselves out of work under National going into the Christmas period. I think New Zealanders deserve better than that. And that's only to fund the cuts that they have already identified. As has been made very clear today by independent analysis, there's at least another $2 billion that they're going to need to find from somewhere because their numbers simply don't add up. That's going to result in potentially thousands more people losing their jobs under a prospective national government. I think it's time for Christopher Luxon to front up and to show some responsibility and accept some accountability and release the National Party's internal costings, because no one is saying that their numbers add up. So it's about time that he was more upfront with the New Zealand public and showed the New Zealand public what exactly it is they're going to cut and why it is that they think that tax cuts now are affordable when nothing that they have produced has indicated that they are.
Nicola Willis says that there's not a physical hole, it's just someone's opinion.
Nicola Willis hasn't released any numbers to back up the National Party's tax cut plans. Nobody with any economic credibility is saying that their numbers add up. Nicola Willis and Christopher Luxon are saying, just trust me. Trust is something that you earn, and you don't earn it by being one of the least transparent oppositions New Zealand has ever seen. Why they think their plan is so needs to be such a deep, dark secret is beyond anybody, I think. If they were really confident in their numbers, they would show people what they are.
They've had more than 2 weeks to release it now, 2 weeks and 1 day. Is their tax plan completely cooked now?
I think not only is National's tax plan completely cooked, I think their economic credibility's gone down the toilet with it as well. Frankly, if they were so confident in their numbers, they wouldn't hesitate to release them.
You've been talking about National's economic credibility for weeks now, since that plan was released. Yet in the polls, National's at 39–40%. Public just doesn't care, do they?
No one's voted yet. Plenty of time.
You're talking about accountability here today on the local democracy reporting scheme.
Yeah.
West Coast region with 84% of its area under Crown administration. What does Labor plan to do to implement the recommendations of the local government review?
We've indicated that we want to work with local government around the future of local government generally across the country. I want to be clear here that any government that I lead will be very reluctant to move into this in a heavy-handed way around forced amalgamations and so on. We think that those discussions are best held at a local level and are best led by the local government sector themselves. The Local Government Review have recommended some pretty big and bold changes. Not everyone's going to accept that. Some people are going to be really keen to keep their local authorities just as they are. I think that it's really a matter for local government to lead the discussion on the next steps for that change. It's not something that central government should be imposing on local communities.
What about the funding basis that has been quite a big talking point and needs to change? I mean, you've got about 15,000 rating units on the West Coast over a huge area. How is that going to be addressed by Labor?
We've already recognised that funding some of the big infrastructure challenges, for example, that local authorities face is going to require different ways of thinking about the funding. The changes that we've made to the way we administer our water infrastructure is a good example of how we can get better economies of scale and better funding models so that local communities don't see massive rates bills increases in order to fund things like upgrading water infrastructure. In the transport space, just today we've actually announced more funding for local roads here on the West Coast to build more resilience in the local roads, because we don't think that that should all be left to local communities. We do need to see the government stepping up and stepping in to help support that. So that's a mix of investments through our state highway network here on the coast, but through the National Land Transport Fund we're also supporting local roading projects as well, and we'll continue to do that.
Some of National's biggest criticisms of some of Labor's policies has been that experts don't support them. Are they being hypocritical now by just discounting the views of experts?
The National Party cannot find one single tax expert or one single economist that thinks that their numbers add up. It's just simply beyond credibility for them to say that they could deliver the sorts of tax cuts that they're proposing to deliver without either significantly cutting further into public services or borrowing more money in order to fund them. Now, if they're going to go with the borrowing more money option, they'll end up in the same territory that Liz Truss did in the UK, where she basically tried to implement massive unaffordable tax cuts and tanked the UK economy in the process. That is ultimately what the National Party appear to be proposing to do.
Last night's One News poll put Labor on 28%, more than 10 points behind National. Is there any way that you can turn that poll polling around?
Absolutely.
How?
With a good campaign.
Do you think you've got a good campaign?
Yep.
Is Nicola Willis actually going to do what Liz Truss did to the New Zealand economy? Is that what you're saying? That she's going to, if Nicola Willis becomes the finance minister, if National becomes government, they're going to tank the economy?
The approach of borrowing for massive tax cuts or significant cuts to public services will have a significant economic impact on New Zealand's economy. Nicola Willis is boasting at the moment about putting thousands of people out of work right before Christmas. That's a pretty rough Christmas present for the New Zealanders who will find themselves losing their jobs right before Christmas under a potential national government.
But when it comes to your personal ratings, people are feeling more negative about your poll out this morning. Are you worried about that at all?
No, plenty of time to go before the election. I'm not going to worry about that sort of stuff. You'll poll a lot of questions between now and the election, and some of them will be good and some of them will be bad, and that's just the nature of election campaigns. There is really one focus for me, and that is to secure as many votes as I can between now and October the 14th.
How do you turn those poll numbers around?
With a good campaign.
We heard today on the coast people talking about food insecurity and the impact of the cost of living here, particularly in rural communities, transport costs, getting to go and buy food and hits them particularly hard. What's Labor doing specifically for rural communities in this cost of living crisis?
Well, you will have seen it. The initiative that we visited this morning is actually an initiative that was funded, through funding that we've made available as a government, because we do recognise that there are some communities in real need. There's also an opportunity around food rescue to actually reduce the amount of waste that's going to landfill when we've got people who could be eating it instead through better management of the food chain. And so we believe that there's certainly we'll continue to back those sorts of projects. But as you will have seen, I've released the pledge card for the campaign. It contains a number of commitments that is actually going to ease the cost of living pressure that New Zealanders face wherever in the country it is that they're living. Taking GST off fruit and vegetables, making sure that prescriptions stay free when the opposition are proposing to put the prescriptions fees back on, introducing free dental care for the under 30s, and continuing to support many of the initiatives like Apprenticeship Boost, which will be helping to build projects like this that are keeping Kiwis in work.
In
You keep
2017, Jacinda Ardern in her speech to the Throne said that a Labour government would ban all new mining on conservation land. Why has that not been implemented?
We remain committed to that policy. The Labour Party remains committed to that policy. There are still a couple of bits that we're working through. One is around the access to pounamu, particularly with Ngāi Tahu, and those conversations are ongoing. That has been a stumbling block to progressing further with it with haste. The other is the stewardship land review, which also has an which has an impact on this. So we've got to complete those two pieces of work before we can move further with the no new mines
with Ngāi Tahu, could you
legislation.
do a carve-out for them?
I don't want to cut across the negotiations because obviously we're still in conversation with them about how we can best reflect the fact that they actually have, through their treaty settlements, some guaranteed rights that we don't want to legislate over the top of. So that is something, I know from experience these things do take time. It's important that we get them right.
You're still a Chris Hipkins government would still want to ban all new mining on conservation land?
That still remains the Labour Party's policy, yes.
You keep talking about running a good campaign. We're almost 2 weeks into this campaign now, and the polls that have come out since the start of the campaign have shown support for your party dropping. You're going to need to do something different. Why is that not resonating with the campaign so far, not resonating with voters?
I think, as I've said, we've set out on our pledge card the commitments that we're giving to New Zealanders. I can guarantee that everything that's on this pledge card is affordable. We've got a budget that will pay for it. And we believe that we're absolutely confident we'll be able to deliver it. Everybody can look at the numbers that sit behind that. It's very transparent. Flip over to the other side and you'll see what's at risk under a change of government. National proposed to cut into New Zealanders' superannuation entitlements by raising the age. They're proposing to put thousands of people out of work across the country, not just in Wellington, with massive cuts to our public services. And that is before they found a way to fill the multi-billion-dollar hole that they've got because their overseas home buyer tax simply doesn't stack up. Never mind also mentioning the fact that house prices across the country will go up when they remove the foreign buyer ban. These are all the risks. So that is what we're going to be campaigning on.
Last night's poll also put Winston Peters and New Zealand First on 5%. What do you think of that result?
I've been really clear. We won't be working with Winston Peters in government. Winston Peters is a force for chaos. And I think a National Act New Zealand First government, where David Seymour and Winston Peters were running circles around Christopher Luxon, would be disastrous for the country.
Can you justify that states in this region in particular benefited quite highly from, say, the Provincial Growth Fund under the New Zealand First Labour coalition from 2017? People here have seen some real benefits, you might say. Can you characterise it as chaos?
The Provincial Growth Fund was a Labour initiative that we took into our coalition negotiations with New Zealand First. The fact that Shane Jones was the minister for it for the first 3 years of our government doesn't mean that he gets to claim all of the responsibility for it, though I know that he likes to. Actually, it was an initiative that we supported right from the beginning, and we're very proud of it.
The West Coast is seen as the birthplace of the Labour Party. How confident are you that you're going to get the backing of West Coast in this election?
Very confident. I'll let the local member add to that.
Look, I've asked local people to judge us on our performance, and you can look around a place like Greymouth and see the activity, the progress that is being made here in some tough times. We've been through a period of COVID where tourism was effectively shut down. We are bouncing back. This economy on the West Coast has a high level of average incomes, low level of unemployment. We're doing really well, like many regions around the country. I think West Coasters appreciate that. Times are tough as well in terms of individuals' cost of living because we are a little way from some of the areas where food is produced. But I think they appreciate that we will back them to grow this region as we always have done.
Damien, just while you're still there, you're Associate Transport Minister. Why have you not approved bilingual road signs yet?
I'm looking at the effectiveness of the signage system across New Zealand. We have a high road toll. Signage, in my view, contributes in part to the confusion on the roads that leads to accidents. So what I've asked Waka Kotahi to do is to just go and provide me the policy documents and what they have decided as good road signage policy. I need to know that we don't double down on what I consider needs to be reviewed. So let's have a look at road signage. We have bilingual signage for kura, for schools, and that's been rolled out. Before we roll that out across the whole country and double down on what might be a policy that's not effective when it comes to road safety, I'm asking those questions.
Have you delayed it because of the election?
No, I've delayed it because I want to know that the signage system in this country delivers the safety that we expect. I travel around this country a lot and I see signs in the wrong place. They are too small, people are confused, and we see accidents as a result of that. I want us to make sure that, firstly, signs for safety are appropriate, are effective, and then we can look at bilingual signs as people have approved. But we need to know we don't double down on a dumb policy.
Are you just moving away from it? Is Labor moving away from bilingual signs?
No, we're not. I, as Minister, have asked that the signage system in this country is effective for road safety. I don't believe it's as good as it should be.
Because you were ready to rubber stamp it, weren't you?
It came before me. I've just come into the role. I have every right to just check on the policies that I'm being asked to sign off are effective. We need to reduce the number of people who are killed and injured on our roads. Signage is a part of that. Let's get that right, then move on to bilingual signs.
The New Zealand Institute of Economic Research has looked into this year's budget. They've done some analysis that suggests that 80% of budget initiatives have a bad climate impact. Have you seen that analysis, and what do you think of it?
I haven't seen that analysis, but I can say that we do consider climate impact in the budget decisions that we take, and that is the reason why New Zealand has seen its climate emissions reducing for 3 years in a row. We're the first New Zealand government in our history to achieve that, and we're going to continue to do that. I've said that my focus is on making sure that the initiatives that we're funding in that area are the most effective and the ones that are giving us the best bang for buck. If you look at the New Zealand Steel deal, if you look at the Fonterra deal, the funding that we're putting in through GIDI, which is the Government Investment in Decarbonising Industry, the Clean Car Discount, these are things that are actually making a tangible, meaningful difference to reducing our carbon emissions.
Murray Petrie peer-reviewed the analysis. He says New Zealand's way off track in terms of meeting its climate commitments. Do you agree with that?
Like I said, I haven't seen the report, but what I can say is that we're absolutely committed to meeting the emissions reductions budgets that we have set.
Are you going to announce any climate policies during the campaign that could, work as part of meeting those goals?
Yes, we haven't announced all of our policy yet. There's still more to come in the climate space.
What's your view on
the West Coast has seen the effects of climate change? I don't know whether this is a question for you, Prime Minister or Damien. What is Labor doing to help mitigate those effects?
I mean, just up the road in my hometown of Westport, we have spent $100 million helping that community get through the effects of a massive flood. They're still not safe. We've committed over $20 million to a flood wall to protect the people in that town, but we do have to take some long-term planning initiatives, work with the councils here to ensure that we don't just repeat, the mitigation and the offsets, that actually we plan for a more resilient future. The West Coast is exposed. It's a narrow region between the mountains and the sea. We have some challenges when it comes to natural events, and we have to make sure that the communities are safe. So the effects of climate change, you'll see from time to time, as the sea gets warmer, more moisture moves up, it's got to come down. And so those things will affect communities not just on the West Coast, but actually across the whole country.
Prime Minister, the Ministry for Pacific Peoples, you remember that they spent $40,000 on a farewell party, and we've got some documents that show that the Ministry for Disabled Peoples was planning a big hui that was going to cost $88,000. And then when that story came out about the Ministry for Pacific Peoples and then your government warning about don't do this type of stuff, they've cancelled it, but they've still had to pay thousands of dollars because they can't recoup costs. Is that acceptable that they were doing that hui in the first place?
I think every government agency needs to be really mindful of all of its public spending all of the time. We've learned through the global pandemic that actually there are effective ways of bringing people together that are much cheaper than flying people all over the country for conferences and so on. And I expect all public sector agencies to be embracing that. So I want to see them looking at things like video conferencing rather than flying people around the country. That's going to deliver better bang for buck for the taxpayer. And it actually is going to save people time and be more efficient as well. I'd expect all public sector agencies to be taking that very seriously.
Is there a culture of being...
Can we have priority here for local media?
Sorry. It was actually national question. But what's your view on ACT's policy to have a referendum on the treaty and the co-governance?
Look, New Zealand has signed up to the treaty 180 years ago, more than 180 years ago. I don't think that having a referendum on whether you should back out of obligations that effectively, allowed us all to be here is the right way to go. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Sorry, mate. I was trying
to get it in there.